When I was very young, I think I was about 12 or 13, my mum said something to me that's always stuck with me, which is your body is the only thing you'll ever have in your whole life that you truly own. And I thought, wow. And the older I've got, the more I've realized how wise that is as a piece of advice. Because first of all,
hello and welcome back to the How to Fitness podcast with me, Michael Ujoa.
And me, Kate Lyman.
And today we have an interview episode, and it's an interview I've been very excited for us to do, Kate.
Yeah, Michael brought up this interview possibility, it was like a few months ago, right, Michael?
Yeah,
and we just kind of like work it out. So I am very excited. I have learned a lot, not just from our interview, but from following Natasha, who we're going to speak to shortly, and learning about all the absolutely incredible work she does.
Yeah, she does a lot, and there's so much crossover with the work that we do here on this podcast and the work we do with clients and on social media. So yeah, I know that people are going to really enjoy this chat. So Natasha Devon, MBE, is a writer, broadcaster, and campaigner. Since 2008, she has visited schools and colleges throughout the world, delivering talks and conducting research on mental health and related issues such as body image and gender equality. Natasha has a weekly show on LBC, one of Britain's most popular speech radio stations, and a monthly column in Teach Secondary magazine.
Natasha is an ambassador for Glitch UK, a charity who advocate for improved experiences for marginalized communities online, particularly Black women. She's also a patron for No Panic, a charity who support people who struggle with their experiences of anxiety. She has been awarded an MBE for her services to young people and is a fellow of the University of Wales, Aberystwyth.
Right, should we jump straight in?
Let's do it.
Hello, Natasha. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
thank you for having me.
We're both incredibly excited. I've been a huge fan of your work for so long, and I floated the idea to Kate quite a while ago now, actually, wasn't it? I was thinking, like, we need to get Natasha on the show. Like, our beliefs, our thoughts on a lot of topics align quite well, and a lot of the work that you do in so many different areas overlaps with a lot of the content that we speak about. So, yeah, I think there's so many different things that we could discuss today. So, yeah, I think we're just going to jump straight into it, if that's okay. I don't know if we're going to do a little bit of an intro separate to this, but if you just want to tell people a little bit about like what you do, because we have a listenership that's quite worldwide, like Kate's based in Oaxaca, I'm here in the UK, a lot of people in the US that listen. If you could just describe what you do to people, that would be great.
The kind of nub of my work is since 2008, I've been going into schools and colleges all over the world and speaking to teenagers about what's missing from what we call here in Britain PSHE. So that's personal health and social education. Asking them if they could have a lesson on anything, what would that be? That would help them to kind of navigate the world and to deal with the challenges that they face. And then based on the responses that they give me, I then work with experts in psychology and neuroscience and other social sciences as well. And I come up with these lesson plans, which I share with charities and I take back into schools and colleges myself. And the kinds of things I cover are things like social media and how to deal with the world of social media, body image, which I know we're going to be talking about today, exam stress, negotiating transitions as you go through life. So particularly that move to university when you're kind of 17, 18, 19 years old, that's a measurable point of vulnerability when it comes to mental health. So it's, how do you prepare yourself emotionally for that? So that's the kind of basis of everything that I do. And then doing that work led me into campaigning because I very quickly worked out that the best way to improve everybody's mental health outcomes would be to make the world fairer. So I do a lot of campaigning in the area of gender equality and also LGBTQ equality as well. I do some media work. I have a radio show on a station called LBC on Saturdays, and I do some kind of government parliamentary campaigning and consultancy work too. But I kind of try to put the voices of young people at the center of everything.
I love that. Yeah,
So
really,
cool.
really cool.
Also, I wish I'd had like a droplet of that in my high school experience, because I can't remember anyone ever talking about mental health as I went through any part of school.
Yeah.
Well, do you know what I think the mistake that a lot of people make, and this was certainly my starting point, so I'm not saying this is a criticism, but we kind of reach adulthood and we reflect on our school experience and we go, I'm going to create the lesson that I wished I had. And as somebody who has experience of mental health issues, we were taught about mental health, but it was always very focused on the extremes. It wasn't the kind of day-to-day challenges. We were never taught that everybody has mental health and that, it fluctuates throughout your life. But the problem is that the zeitgeist will always have shifted. The themes may remain universal in terms of what teenagers experience, but the way that they experience it will change. And I wanted to keep what I was doing as relevant as possible. So that's where the idea of doing focus groups and actually saying to teenagers, look, what do you want to be taught and how do you want to be taught it? That's where that idea came from.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I love that. I'm the same. I don't really remember us having, well, there may be skirting conversations, but we didn't have any deep, meaningful conversations around body image or mental health at all when I was back at school. So it sounds like you're doing such incredible work. There's something that I wanted to pick up from your bio, which has made me love you even more, which is fantastic. So in 2015, you were briefly appointed as the government's first ever mental health czar, but was fired after 9 months for being too outspoken about the impact of austerity and changes to education policy on young people's well-being. And
yeah, that's the thing that happened.
Can you just explain a little bit about that story, just to see how that came about? I don't know how I didn't know that about you. It's really sad, frustrating, and depressing, but also a fantastic little bit for your bio.
Well, sure. I mean, so I got a call in 2015 from the Department for Education saying, do you want to be our first ever, they called it a mental health champion for schools.
Is that for the Conservative government, right? When they first came in?
Conservative government, right. Which was why my first question was, are you sure? Have you called the right person? Because I'd been incredibly critical of particularly we had an education secretary here called Michael Gove, who introduced these huge sweeping changes to the curriculum that focused far more on what he called core academia and then deprioritized things like sport, art, music, and PSHE, and pretty much defunded those subjects in state schools. And I had been incredibly critical of that. And they went, no, it's non-party political, it's non-partisan, and you do so much work on the ground in schools. And what we're looking for is somebody who can report at government level what, teachers and students and parents are telling you. So I was like, cool, that sounds great. But because I was the first ever one, there was so much press attention that came alongside that. And, the thing that I was seeing most that was affecting families were not only those education changes that I just spoke about, but also the impact of austerity measures. So we had again in 2010, the government came in and they cut a lot of the services in communities like social services, for example, educational psychology, libraries, sports facilities, things that we know impact individuals' mental health and family well-being. So when the media were saying to me, what do you think is causing this huge rise in mental health issues that we're seeing in young people? I was answering honestly. And of course, that made the government look bad. At one point, I swear down, they just had somebody who was employed to monitor my Twitter account, right? And every time I tweeted anything remotely critical of government, I got a phone call, can you delete that? Oh, wow. And I'm like, I'm not being paid for this. I never signed a contract. At no point was it made clear that I would have to amend my message and my voice and stop being truthful in order to do this work. So eventually what they said to me was, they didn't say you're fired. They said, we're going to have a more general mental health czar that's not just for young people, which would effectively make your role obsolete. And then they replaced me with somebody who was on Love Island.
You do so much incredible work in so many areas, and we'd love to dig into body image a little bit more, because I know you share a lot of messages around not just challenging societal norms around our bodies and weight and diet culture, but also how to navigate challenges in body image. And I think this is a topic that's going to be so beneficial to our audience, which is very broad. Our audience is a lot of different people from a lot of different places and backgrounds. So I would love to first kind of set the scene a little bit and hear how you define body image and what you think some are the biggest factors that shape it for us from a young age.
For me, and I talk about this a lot actually with the young people I work with, I think for me, it's body image is about respecting this vessel that houses your soul and allows you to do the things that you need to do day to day. It's not about loving your body. I think that's an unhelpful term because it's unrealistic, and also it kind of borders on or can be a bit narcissistic as well, I think. I think it's just about having a respect for your body. And I think from our earliest moments, we are swimming in a cultural water that encourages us not to respect our bodies. So we are told that the natural hunger cues that we're all born with that tell us when we're hungry and when we're full, that we shouldn't listen to those, but we should instead follow these strict calorie controlled diets. And that's a way to be healthy. Certainly, as soon as we enter puberty and in our teenage years, we're told to disregard our health and that it's all about attaining a certain aesthetic in ways that can be very painful and dangerous and expensive. We're always taught to work against our bodies and to see our bodies as an enemy rather than as an ally. And body image, I think, is just reclaiming a respectful relationship with your body.
I love that so much. And I think to that point, it's often this misconception that we look in the mirror and we're like, I love everything. Yeah. Like, I love my legs and my arms. And I think there are some people who can do that, but I hear of that misconception. I'm like, okay, that's not even me. That's not even what feels possible for me. So what are some other common misconceptions that you've picked up on body image in your work?
The one that I just wish would die is, and you get asked this question a lot if you do interviews in media, is when people say, having positive body image is all very well and good, but we've got an obesity crisis. And that is rooted in this idea that if you have positive body image, you will sit on your couch all day and eat crisps because you won't care about your health. And the evidence doesn't support that. The evidence shows that if you have positive body image, if you respect your body, that you naturally make healthier choices. You want to move your body for joy. You want to exercise because you're in tune with your body. You want to eat a range of foods. And again, when you're really tuned into what your body's saying, it's amazing how often you crave broccoli. But when you're
Right.
tuned out of it and you're all about naughty foods and nice foods, of course you're going to crave chocolate or whatever it is. So yeah, I think that's the biggest misconception that I'm pushing against, is that physical health is somehow at odds with mental health, when actually they work together,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. It's also, so what influences body image then? So is most of it, like, what external cues are there that kind of influence body image? Is it a bit more internal work? Like, what are all the different kind of ingredients that go into creating a healthy body image?
My advice for parents is always, if you want your children to have a positive body image, the best and most proactive thing you can do is work on your own body image first. Because I think in our earliest moments, actually, the messages that we're getting come from the adults around us. And I think particularly for girls, this is true, that they're told, oh, you're beautiful, you're gorgeous, you're lovely. But then they hear adult women complaining about their bodies a lot. It encourages this fear of, like, a child's body is wonderful, but an adult woman body is problematic and something that, is this endless cause of anxiety. And I think it's no surprise then that a lot of eating disorders start to manifest around puberty, when, you're going through those first steps into adulthood. So I think it does come from our communities and our family, but the biggest influence, obviously, are these sort of multi-billion pound industries, fitness, fashion, beauty, that create things for us to worry about in order to sell us solutions to problems that never existed. And do you know what? So I'm on a database for journalists, and one of my interests on the site is body image. And for whatever reason, I think some PR people look at that and think, oh, she will have an interest in this press release about this new procedure, this new tweakment that's been invented. So I get sent all of these press releases about parts of my body that I never think about. Like, I got one the other day that was about, if you wear a bra, more often than not, you'll have a little bit of squidge, like between your neck and your bra strap, right? Which is something I've never thought about before. I've never considered was an issue before, really. But you can now have a procedure which gets rid of that, and they're calling it a buffalo hump.
Oh my gosh.
And it's stuff like that where I'm like, wow, they will never let us be in peace. It will be a new part of our body tomorrow,
I think that in the work we do, and I guess I'm speaking for myself, but I think this is true for you too, Michael, we're up against so much of that. We're working with a lot of women who, I mean, men and women who have goals for how they want to feel in their body, but we're up against so much of the messaging of, but we got to fix this part, and this is wrong. And I felt this way about food or my body since I was 5 years old because my mom said this or whatever. It's just like so ingrained.
Yeah. And also you can never win. That's the other thing. So I think it's hilarious that when I was growing up, I was mercilessly teased. I wouldn't say bullied, because I think bully is a strong word and it suggests that it has a really profound impact on you. But I was very much teased by the other girls in my school for having big lips, right? And I got really self-conscious about them. When I put my hand up in class to ask a question, I used to put my hand in front of my mouth because I was self-conscious about how my lips looked. And now, like, I get people coming up to me in the street saying, where did you get your lips done? They look really natural. And I'm like, well, yeah, they would, because they are, because the beauty standard has changed. But I also get people on the internet who will say, like, you look ridiculous. You know, you've had, I don't know if I can swear on this podcast.
Yeah, go for it.
They say, okay.
Yeah.
So they say, you've had shit injected into your face. How can I take anything that you say seriously? And I'm like, wow, okay. So if you don't fit the beauty standard, then you're teased. If you naturally fit the beauty standard, everybody assumes you're stupid because obviously you can never be attractive and intelligent. You know, no human being has those two qualities. And then if you look like you have paid money to attain the beauty standard, you're ridiculed for that as well. And those are your three options, really. And it just shows that you can't win.
Yeah. I think there's definitely parallels as well, isn't there? The kind of the wellness world as well, and working within the fitness world too, of how your body is supposed to look in order for you to be able to sell health and kind of fitness, you know? And if you don't look a certain way, like I get a lot of shit on social media from usually guys that have their tops off in their profile pictures about how can I provide people with health and fitness advice when I look overweight, skinny, no matter what it is. Like the goalposts are always just going to be moved and never going to be able to win. I will also preface that with, I feel like the pressures on women are way higher than they are on men. Not that they're not an issue for men too, but I just don't think we're ever going to be able to win in that regard. Let's keep the topic on social media then for now, if that's okay, just because I think that is such a big one. Kate and I spend most of our time kind of bashing social media for all the awful things that it has done to society. But do you think that social media plays a huge part now in the way that we view our own body image and how it influences it? Or is social media more of a mirror of how society actually is as a whole?
So I think social media it can either be a positive or a negative influence, depending on how you use it. And I think the problem is that a lot of people still think that social media is like television. And it's like, oh, I'm just watching what's on. And it's like, no, this has all been tailored specifically for you. And the algorithm knows a lot about you. It knows about your insecurities. It knows about your habits. It knows when you're most likely to buy something. It knows about your anxieties and your fears and all of that stuff. And unless you become an active participant in social media, it's going to continually feed all the worst aspects of your nature, because that's how you retain someone's attention. You make them feel anxious, you make them feel scared and insecure. They've worked out that we're naturally inclined to spend more time looking at that type of content than content that makes us feel good and nurtures our self-esteem. So I think the solution is that if we're going to be consumers of social media, we have to be a lot more proactive at gaming the algorithm and saying, what is it that I need to be the best version of myself? And how am I going to seek out that content?
I love that so much because it's not going to go away. It's not, we can like complain about social media. It's not going to go anywhere, but there are ways we can engage that are going to help us a bit more. Do you have any specific tips for what that can look like? Like, I love what you're saying, like game the system, which is a really fun way to put it, honestly, rather than being like, oh, like I'm beholden to this algorithm. Like, how can we do that? How can we game the system?
I think the first thing to do is to go through your social media mindfully. And I think we get really used to just hopping on our phones when we're bored and multitasking as well. So my partner works in television, and they were saying that there's this thing that they talk about in commissioning meetings now, which is two-screen ability. And it's like is the plot of this simple enough that someone could be scrolling on their phone at the same time and still keep up with this?
Wow, is that a thing now?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay. I
wow.
don't know how
That's
I don't know how I feel about that. That's awful.
right, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of the time when we are consuming social media, we think we're not paying attention, but our unconscious brains are always switched on and always absorbing that information. So I would encourage everybody to go through their social media feeds and really pay attention. How is this making me feel? What emotion is this designed to evoke? And if the answer is insecure, anxious, pointlessly angry for no reason at all, you find ways of minimizing that content. And that looks different on different platforms, but you can say to the algorithm, you know, less of this, please. I'm not interested in this. There are various options that you can tick on there. You then ask yourself the question, why am I on social media? What was it I was looking to get out of this experience? And you actively find accounts and content that feed those needs. And to be honest, that's how I came across your stuff, Michael, because I was like, right, what I want is some fitness content that is going to not feed into any insecurities, but give me positive messages around, you know, health and balance and not getting obsessed with it while still making time for fitness in your life.
Mm-hmm. Were you kind of whispering into your phone whilst it was on the table, trying to give it little hints? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I think back to school and how stressful it was without social media. Like, we had to tell mum to get off the phone so we could go on MSN and chat to our friends. Whereas the thought of having that in your pocket all day long as a kid now, it genuinely terrifies me. And I don't know. So both Kate and I have young kids, so they're around the same age, around 2 years old. And the thought of having to navigate that already is giving me anxiety. So yeah, any tips that we can have to help kind of introduce kids? I know they're way too young and I don't want to give them a smartphone anytime soon, but like, how do we introduce kids to using social media? Is there like conversations you can have with them, or what can we do to kind of set them up to have as less of a negative impact as possible?
Well, there's a huge movement here in the UK, and I'm sure in other countries in the world as well, called smartphone free childhood. And these are groups of parents who don't think that you should be able to access social media until you're 16, and that up until that point, you should have a phone that is disabled for apps. So it's a smartphone. You can do everything else with it. You can use maps, you can listen to music, all the other things you use a smartphone for, but you can't have social media apps on it. And I think that the major advantage of that is that it's actually connecting parents with similarly minded parents, because what a lot of parents are saying is, so my child's coming to me at the age of 8 or 9 and saying, I need a smartphone because everybody else in my class has a smartphone. And as a parent, that makes you feel really isolated. Like, well, I can't be the only one who thinks that that's not the right age to give it to them. And what movements like this are doing is saying, no, in fact, there's another parent in your school who thinks that that's not the right age. You know, talk to them about it. So there's that. I think there's delaying the onset of this. You don't magically stop being vulnerable at the age of 16, though. And there are lots of things that we can do in terms of education, I think, to prepare young people for what they're going to encounter. And a big thing is this concept of information hygiene, is that we evolved during a time where information was scarce. And we've also evolved to cling on to negative information because it's more helpful for our survival. You know, if there's a snake over there and someone tells you there's a snake over there and you shouldn't go over there, it's very important to remember that. So that's why we're more attracted to negative than positive information. We are now in the opposite environment to the one that we evolved in. Information is everywhere and it's designed to evoke those feelings of fear and anxiety. So we need to adapt our behavior in order to deal with that environment. And so when we come across information, we need to be automatically going, right, is this true? Can I verify this? Is it important for me to have an opinion on this? Or can I just sit with this for a while? Do I need to talk to somebody about what I've just heard or seen? It's like a muscle, really. The more you practice doing that, the easier it becomes. So I think with kids, you know, teaching them that not every bit of information that they hear or see is true, introducing them to the concept of verified sources, letting them know that you're open to that conversation. They can always talk to you about anything that they've heard or seen. Super important.
Love that. Yeah. Thank you.
Wow. That made me feel better.
Yeah.
Well, right, I'm like, we're so far from that, Michael. I know, and who knows what we'll be up against when Jude and Milo are in this age, but like, I love that concept of information hygiene. And it feels to me similar to how we navigate this podcast, right, Michael, where we're saying, hey, we need to have the right information so we make the best decisions for us and our health. a similar concept, right?
Mm-hmm.
Natasha, I'm hoping we can bring it back to body image a little bit because this is a topic that I think is going to be really helpful for our listeners. I know many people, because it's a normal human experience, struggle with navigating body image and the fluctuations that happen. What is your take on bad body image days? Like, is that something that we're all going to experience at some point in time? Is it something that doesn't have to happen? And how can we navigate those tougher days?
I think everybody has bad body image days, but I think you particularly do if you are somebody who menstruates. And I've spoken to so many other people who have periods about this, that there are about 3 days during your cycle where you're like, wow, I am so hot today. And, and then that's it. That's your allocated hotness time. And then, you have that week where you're like, I'm hideous. And then the rest of the time, you're kind of neutral. And I think as much as those hormonal fluctuations are difficult to navigate, it's helpful in a way because, you can look back at photographs on yourself and go, I looked no different that day. It was just my perception of how I looked. And it teaches you that there are fluctuations and that nothing is forever and that it's like a cloud, it passes over. So I think tuning into, and even you could do it. I know that there are apps that do this for mood, but there's no reason why you couldn't do this with body image specifically, where you kind of assign an emoji to each day. This is how I feel today about my body. And then if you practice that every single day over time, you look back and you start to see patterns of, oh, okay, for a couple of days I felt really bad, but then it was okay. And it's normal. It's normal for your motivation around things like fitness as well to ebb and flow. It all balances out eventually. And being able to sort of zoom out and take almost a meta view of it, I think can be really helpful for perspective.
Yeah, that's great because then we're able to see that, okay, like my perception of my body changes more than my body ever could.
Yeah.
It's hard to change in any way, shape, or form, right? Like my perception is the fickle one here. So how can we challenge those negative body image days without just like forcing positivity? What can we do?
I think being kind to yourself is, and I don't mean that in a kind of glib way. I mean, talking to yourself in the same way as you would your best friend. And I have a friend who you should get on this podcast, actually. She's great, called Sharu Izadi. She wrote a book called The Kindness Method, and it's all about changing habits. And one of the first things that she says in this book is, if we had a friend who spoke to us like that, we would go, that friend is toxic, they're coercively controlling, they're emotionally abusive, and you should not have them in your life. If we had a friend who said, you look hideous today and it's your fault because you're lazy, or, all of the things that we say to ourselves, we would not accept that as a good example of friendship. We should strive to take the same attitude towards ourselves and ask ourselves the question, okay, if I had a friend who was verbalizing these very toxic thoughts that I'm having, what would my advice to them be? I think that's a really good starting point.
Yeah, I love that thought. This is kind of a side note, but sometimes if I'm like down on myself for some reason, I'm a nutrition coach, right? My husband as well. He'd be like, what would you tell your clients? And I'm like, shut up. Like, don't even come at me with that. But I like the idea of a friend.
Yeah.
He's like, how would you coach yourself in this moment? I'm like, get out of here. Like, I don't want to hear that.
Yeah. So there is a woman who, I'm sure you have them as well, like haters that just get obsessed with you. And in a way, you kind of want to say thank you because they're tuning into my radio show. They're reading my blogs. It's all helping to make me money, essentially, but completely obsessed with everything that I do. And she just tweets relentlessly about me, this woman. But one of the things that she said about me is, why would you ever have somebody who has experienced mental health issues talking to young people about mental health? Like, that makes no sense at all. And I'm like,
how do you reach that thought process? That's bizarre.
Yeah. You can't imagine.
Yeah. So it's helpful, I think, for all of our professions to understand what the flip side of this looks like and where people's starting point can be,
Yeah, I like that.
She's your biggest fan.
Definitely your biggest fan. I always think that when I listen to LBC, I think these people that, why would you phone up to a show of someone that you really, really dislike, like repeatedly? It doesn't make any sense to me, but I guess some people kind of thrive with that negativity once again, don't they?
Yeah, I think it's the same phenomenon as the social media algorithm, that it's feeding you stuff that's going to make you angry because for a lot of people, they're engaging. Like, it's like a secret no one's let me in on. I have never hate followed anyone in my life. I was talking to a friend just the other day and she was like, oh, I hate follow this woman. And she was telling me about, this is a woman who apparently really admires Andrew Tate. I was like, she sounds dreadful. Why would you ever? I said, oh, I love it. I hate follow her. And it's not something that I'm susceptible to because I quite like enjoying myself.
Yeah.
Um,
That's so bizarre. That is really bizarre. So it's in terms of body image then, like what is the goal? If someone's maybe having bad body image at the moment or they want to make changes, like what should we be striving for? Should we be striving for kind of like indifference or what's the overall goal with it all?
There's a phrase which is body neutrality, which I think is quite a helpful phrase, which is not aiming to feel positive about your body all the time because we know that that's unrealistic, but aiming to, like I say, see your body as an ally. If I look at my own journey, so I had eating disorders in my late teens and throughout pretty much all of my 20s. I started my recovery when I was sort of 26, 27, but it was a long process. There was a period of time where I had to completely disengage from anything that was to do with health at all because it was triggering for me. And then after that period, I had to sort of re-engage with, okay, well, I can't carry on like this because I had no structural routine whatsoever. I wasn't exercising because I knew that I had had a problem with exercise addiction in the past. And so I sort of went on an exercise abstinence thing. But obviously other things that you abstinent from, like alcohol, you can live without. You can't really live without exercising. So I was like, okay, I need to find a way to make my own rules in this space. And then, after many, many years, landed in a place where, I can be mentally and physically healthy. So I think it's, first of all, not expecting overnight that your habits and your feelings will change, and also responding to what it is that you need for that life phase. Because again, going back to my friend Sharu, she talks a lot about binge eating disorder and how the whole movement around intuitive eating, which is really good advice for the majority of people. But she's like, if you have binge eating disorder, intuitive eating is not going to work for you. You need structure. You do need to cut certain foods out of your diet probably because they're your binge foods that are always going to lead you to a binge. And there shouldn't be any judgment around that. I guess it's kind of tailoring it to where you're at and what you need in that moment and being ready to change it as your circumstances change.
Yeah, I love that thought. I am so interested in this idea of how we can just, bring more self-compassion really into the whole topic, right? Because giving ourselves permission to just have days that feel a little harder and recognize that there are patterns, there are ups and downs that we're going to experience, and how we can kind of ride out those harder moments is really important. I think as humans, we're just really quick to judge ourselves for not feeling that neutrality or positivity all the time. And so not only are we navigating tougher body image, but then we get down on ourselves for doing like, oh, well, I can't be positive or neutral all the time. Now I suck because of this as well, which, just adds to the pressure. And it's like, okay, we've harped on this quite a bit this episode. We can't catch a break. We can never catch a break. So I have an additional question. Knowing that, okay, we talked a little bit about the kind of unique patterns for those who menstruate. I know that men do also navigate tough body image days or experiences. What unique struggles are men facing when it comes to body image? Do you have some thoughts on that?
Yes, I very much do. This is something that I have watched happen in real time, bearing in mind that I've been doing this job since 2008. And the perception was that there would be a small cohort of teenage boys who may experience body image issues or eating disorders, but they were very much in a minority. And I have watched the obsession with muscle building. And do you know what I think it is? I think it's, first of all, that it's playing into a shame trigger that a lot of boys and men have around strength. Brené Brown talks about this a lot, that if you want to shame a man, you call him weak. And obviously there are lots of definitions of what it means to be strong, but the way that it has been defined in a lot of Western societies is you got to be stoic, never talk about your feelings, and just look really hench, look like you could rip a man's head off. That's what strength is. And that's the kind of message that they're being fed, which is terrible for their mental health. But I also think it's because for boys more than girls, messages about health and body image are conflated. When you talk to teenage girls, there's two things: that there is still an obsession with being thin. There is also these time-consuming and expensive skincare regimes. I talk to 12-year-olds who have 12-step skincare regimes. And I'm like, dude, I'm 43. I cleanse, I moisturize. I don't really understand what else there is outside of that. And if this is fun for you, if this is nurturing and pampering for you, fine. But they sort of feel like they have to do it, I think, because everybody else is doing it. But they're not thinking that those behaviors are healthy necessarily. It is more about aesthetics. Whereas when you talk to boys and you say, okay, why is it so important that you are muscular? They're like, well, it's important to be strong and healthy. And that's how you're strong and healthy. And so you're almost kind of starting from a point where you have to debunk some of their beliefs around science and, fitness and, what fitness influencers are telling them. And that's before you even get into the body image arena.
And it's really difficult to penetrate that as well. Like, I speak from firsthand experience every single day for some of the things I talk about. I called out a video the other day. A guy was talking really horribly about young women's bodies. It was really gross. And I posted it up to TikTok. It's now up to 2 million views. And the comment section is just a lot of men questioning my sexuality, calling me soy boy, all sorts of things, calling me weak and no muscle, all this kind of stuff. And it is amazing that seems to be the default now. I don't know how we get past this or how we improve the situation here, because I truly feel like I think the Tate situation that's going on at the moment whilst we're recording this is only making things worse. Like, the grip that these guys seem to have on certain demographics or certain young people is terrifying. The way that we've got to a point where people look up to these guys as role models and think there's anything positive that can come out of following them. Like, I just don't know, how do we navigate that? How do we fight against this stuff?
So the thing that I hear most often in relation to Andrew Tate, and there are thousands of copycats out there who might not be as well known, but they're essentially pushing the same message. The thing I hear most often from boys is they say, I don't agree with what he says about women, and I recognize that as toxic, but he is making some good points about working hard, or he is making some good points about how important it is to look after your body and look after your health and go to the gym. So I'm like, okay, those points are also toxic, but just in a less obvious way. So the whole thing about hustle culture, the expectation placed on men that their whole identity is their work and their earning capacity, and that they've got to work hard, play hard, that will kill you eventually, if you buy into that. That's devastating for your mental health. It's the reason why there is a vulnerability point around suicide at retirement age for men. It's why so many men burn out. It's why so many men self-medicate with alcohol and other drugs, and 3 times more instances of men needing to seek help for dependency and addiction than there are for women. And also the stuff around fitness, it's kind of what you're doing, I think, Michael, is sort of taking out the toxicity of that message and going, yeah, of course it's important to eat as healthily as you're able to. Of course it's important to move your body regularly. You don't have to do it in this way, though, in this kind of prescribed, regimented way that is playing into all of your insecurities. And then when inevitably it doesn't make you happy, telling you that that's women's fault. And that's why the misogyny is so essential to that message, because the messages that they're giving, they know it's not going to make boys and men happy. They need a scapegoat. So they go, well, that's women. Can't possibly be my fault for giving you awful advice. That must be the fault of the women.
Yeah.
Oof, is all I got. It's just so hideous. It's so hideous. And we see this pattern, I know, with the Tate brothers, but I am a U.S. citizen. I am a U.S. voter. Like, we see it happening we see it happening everywhere, right? And it's everything we're talking about. It's preying on insecurities in our bodies, plus the social media factor, plus everything you're saying, Natasha.
Do you know something that does have an almost immediate positive impact on body image is, and social media makes it easier for you to do this, is surrounding yourself with a diverse range of different bodies.
Yes.
And I know this because back in 2019, I did a documentary called Naked Beach. Now, I was not naked at any point. I want to make this clear.
No judgment, no judgment.
I mean, it would have been fine if I was. I was the presenter that presented the show, but it was based on a piece of research done by Professor Keon West at Goldsmiths University. And what it found was that if you have low body image satisfaction, but you don't have a diagnosable mental health issue, so you don't have body dysmorphia, you don't have an eating disorder, if you spend time around a diverse range of naked people, it will improve the way that you feel about your body. So it was an experiment where we sent people to live on a Greek island with 8 naked body positivity campaigners for 2 weeks. And we sort of measured their self-esteem, body image satisfaction, and life satisfaction at the beginning and the end of that fortnight. But what was incredible to me about doing that show is that, so we recorded it in the summer of 2018 and then it went to air on Channel 4 in 2019. And in that year, all of the contributors had continued on that journey of completely changing how they felt about their bodies, but also their whole lives had changed because of that. And when I asked them, what is it that has enabled you to carry on implementing what you learn on the island? They said, well, when I came off the island, I followed those body positivity campaigners on Instagram. And the algorithm went, oh, okay, you're interested in body positivity. I'm going to give you a whole load of other accounts. And now the people in my feed all look different from each other. And it reminds me that there are loads of ways to be human. So it really does work.
Right. I'm setting up a naked meetup in Edinburgh as we speak. There's such a great tip though, not the naked meetup, the kind of following people on social media. It's something I recommend to my clients and to people that I speak with on social media all the time. And it works. Like it really does work. Like firsthand experience, I used to follow just your kind of typical gym bro fitness accounts. I wonder why I feel crap about my body all of the time. I now follow such amazing kind of diverse bodies on social media doing such brilliant things, and just doesn't hit like it used to. Like I'm not immune to the pressures of the fitness industry or the wellness industry, but I feel like the stuff bounces off a little bit easier. So it's such a solid tip. So yeah, thank you so much for that. That's great.
I'm like so pro the mute button. Like I'm like, oh, I need to follow my friends, like I don't want to like not follow my friends or whatever, or people in my colleagues or whatever, but I mute those people. I'm like, nope, we're not going to see your stuff. We're only going to see stuff from people who don't look like me or do completely different things, completely different industries and everything. I love that.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
All right, Natasha, one last question. Okay, as we wrap things up, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received around either mental health or body image?
There's two things. I think when I was very young, I think I was about 12 or 13, my mum said something to me that's always stuck with me, which is your body is the only thing you'll ever have in your whole life that you truly own. And I thought, wow. And the older I've got, the more I've realized how wise that is as a piece of advice, because first of all, it emphasizes how important it is to take care of it and not assume that you're immortal and do all kinds of terrible things to your body in the pursuit of a certain aesthetic. But also it gives you ownership. The message is, it's up to you what you do with it. It's no one else's business. The decision is yours. I mean, there are so many areas of life, I think, where that's an important message. The other thing that I think is a really good tip is sometimes the solution is actually to move the conversation away from body image. And I actually, back when I was writing for Cosmopolitan, I did this experiment. I did like a diary of it, where me and my friends for a week, we had a ban on mentioning anything to do with body image. So we weren't even allowed to say, I like your shoes, right? It was like nothing to do with how we looked. And I've got really interesting friends, it turns out. And they read books, they go to see films, they have hobbies, they have really profound thoughts about life and the universe,
Oh, I love that. Natasha, I love this conversation. I love that so much. What I'm taking from it is like, let's just fight. Let's fight against these things that we're told to do that lead us nowhere or lead us to just worry about our bodies when there are so many other things we could be doing with our lives, with our friends, with our social media even. I love that. Thank you for all you've shared.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun.
Yeah, truly, Natasha, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. And please keep up all of the awesome work you are doing. Genuinely, you are a true inspiration. So please keep it up and we'll continue to follow and champion your work as much as we can.
Thank you so much.
Can you tell us, Natasha, what you have going on right now? Any new projects coming up? Any books coming out? Because I know you've authored quite a few books, and where our audience can find you.
So I'm working on 2 books, in fact, at the moment, one for children, one for adults. And I can't really say much about them, but that's what I'm doing, just in case you thought that I was, having a rest, God forbid. But they will be out in autumn 2026 and spring 2027. So keep an eye out for that. My radio show you can listen to it, in fact, anywhere in the world. And if you download Global Player, you can listen back to it like it's a podcast. But it's on LBC from 6 to 9 p.m. on a Saturday. In terms of all the stuff that I have talked about with social media, I have a book called Clicks, How to Be Your Best Self Online. And I wrote it for 13 to 16-year-olds. But so many adults have said, I actually really like this. And because I wrote it for 13 to 16-year-olds, there's like funny cartoons in it and stuff. And I didn't want to give them another textbook when they're at school. So I tried to make it as easy to read as possible. And apparently that's also what grown-ups want. So you can check out that as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Natasha. We really enjoyed this chat with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.